Well, we are in the next to the last week of this series, Restart. Hard to believe, but we started this the first week of January, and here we are, February already. And for the last 6 weeks or so, we've been talking about this idea that most of us as adults need a place where we can restart our faith. And the reason is because you had a faith that when you were a child, and it worked for you when you were a child, and many of us got our faith because our mom or dad said to you, here's what we believe, and you just said, okay, Mom, and it worked for you. Now, others of you, you didn't get it because somebody handed it to you. You just began to look at the world around you or listen to what people said, and you believed that God was a good God, and you believed that God would answer prayer, and that he'd hear you when you pray, and that he rewarded people who were good, and he punished people who were bad, and that worked for you. It was your faith. It's the way the world worked. And then something happens. We become adults, and in adulthood, we begin to notice these gaps between our childhood faith, what we believe, and what we see as how the world works. And the truth is, that didn't bother some of us. Some of us just looked at that and said, well, that's because this is faith and this is real life, and you just kept on believing what you believed, and you didn't ask too many questions about what was going on. You just believed it. But for other people, you looked at your life and you said, I respect my mom and dad, and I respect the pastor I had growing up, and I'm thankful they told me what they did, but what they told me doesn't match up with the way real life works, and so I've got to just put my faith over here and get on with real life. But at the same time, there was this thought that you had that if there is a God, I want to know him. If there is something that's true, I hope I can know it. And so for the last few weeks, this series has been our attempt to get at, let's take all of the stuff that we knew, all the stuff from our background, let's set it off to the side, and let's see if we can find an adult place to restart our faith. And that's where we are today. Now, I need to say again that we are deeply indebted to a guy named Andy Stanley, who's worked through a lot of this content, and we're grateful to him that we have the opportunity to teach through this as well. Now, today in the series, as we're wrapping this up down the last 2 weeks, I need to talk to you today about something that is central to this whole thing of restarting your faith, but we haven't talked about it yet. I mean, we've been saying restart your faith, and truthfully, we haven't talked about faith yet. And I have to talk to you about faith because this word faith, it's one of the most overused, misused words in our language. In fact, if you hang around religious people, in all of religion, this is one of the misused, overused words of all time, and a lot of us are confused about it, and you don't even know that you're confused about it because it gets used so much. And because we're all adults, and this is an adult service, and we're talking to people middle school age and up, and all of you are grown up to understand this, I want to try to go back to what it means, this idea of faith. I want to go at this word of belief, and I want to strip it down to what it really means, and not religious faith. I want to talk to you about the core of what faith and belief means, and then at the end, we'll cycle back around to how it applies to Christianity and to religion in general. Now, in talking about this, we could use the word faith or we could use the word belief, and honestly, they could be used interchangeably, and probably I'm going to wind up doing that, so I don't want you to get confused about that. Faith and belief, they mean the same thing. I want us to look at this idea from just the nature of the word itself, because, faith, belief, they aren't religious words. They're just words. They get used in religious context, but the truth is, everybody joining in with us, everybody listening right now, we all have faith. We all have belief. Faith and belief are as natural to human beings as water is to a fish. It's the environment in which we work. And what I want to try to do is, because when you get into religious environments, when you come into a church and you're hearing this, you're on a church website, you're listening to this, we want to take them and make them some kind of mystical. What I want to try to do is to take all the mystical out of it, and I just want to talk about the nature of faith and belief itself. And then at the end, I want us to take that understanding, and I just want us to apply it, that word, that idea, I want us to apply it to religion in general, and then Christianity specifically. Now, to get at that, I need to talk to you about it this way, because if you're going to restart your faith, then at least you need to understand what faith means. And so I'm going to make 3 observations about this, of just the idea of belief, faith in general. Number 1, the ability to believe is the most powerful force that human beings have. Now, the ability to believe, is something that's uniquely human. Now, we don't normally think about it that way, but what I mean by that is that the cattle that I grew up working with, the first part of my life, they don't have this ability. By that I mean, they don't stand around and imagine the future. They don't make plans for the future. They just eat and sleep and do other things, and then they die. They don't have plans. They don't get together to play. They don't plot about the future. It's not the nature of animals. Belief is the ability for me to project out into the future of what could be and what ought to be. If you think about it, everything that's ever happened in our world, it started because somebody had a belief that it could be and it ought to be the way that they think about it. We have an idea. That's where it starts. We have an idea, and then that idea comes out in words, or you write it down on paper and you share it with other people. Everything that's ever happened in the history of human beings, it started as just this idea that got formed in someone's head, and then they expressed it either on paper or they spoke it out, and they shared it with other people, and that became a belief. Now, for you church people that are hearing me say that, this is a powerful force, this idea to believe, and you think that what I'm saying is what you hear other preachers saying of, that we can speak things into existence, I am not saying that mess. That is not what I'm saying, that we can speak things into existence. What I'm talking about is not mystical at all. I'm talking about that any problem that human beings have ever solved got solved because somebody first believed that it could be solved and it ought to be solved. And then they began to work to solve that problem. There's a place in the Bible where Jesus talks about if you have faith, you can move mountains. And people read that and they get all mystical and they begin to wonder, what's he talking about? How much faith is it taught? And what kind of mountains is he talking about? And they make it all kind of spiritual. And it doesn't have to mean that at all. Everybody joining in, you've all seen mountains moved in your lifetime through the power of belief or faith. I just think about in my lifetime, the medical kind of mountains that have been moved. Diseases that when I was a child crippled children that were in my class and terrified families, that because somebody believed that they ought to be cured and then worked to cure them, they're completely gone from the face of the earth these days. That happened again because somebody sat down and thought, this isn't right and we can do something about it. And then they began to work and think and try things to figure out how they could do something about it, and a disease got cured. That happened because somebody had a belief. They had faith that ought to happen. We've all seen it in all kinds of areas. Educational mountains, racial divide kind of mountains that have gotten moved. And we could go on and on about just the stuff in the last 30 years that if we told people 100 years ago all the things that have been changed just because people believed they could be and they should be, they would think they were miracles. This ability that human beings have to believe is the most powerful thing that the human race has been given. It's behind everything good, and it's behind everything bad that human beings have ever done. And it's not mystical. I'm not talking about some mystical religious thing. It's just that somebody gets an idea and then they begin to think about it and then they share it. And if they can get enough people to share the idea as they talk about it and enough people to believe it with them, then the history of the world is changed. Just think about it. That's how our country got started. it was a group of people that began to think about how the British government was ruling us, and we don't like how they were doing with taxes and other kind of things. And people began to talk about it, and they talked about it enough till other people began to join in. And then they sent delegates to the British government and said, hey, we're not going to pay your taxes. And then they rebelled, and the British government said, well, if you don't pay our taxes, we're going to do something about it. And they said, well, we're not going to pay them, and we got a gun. And they said, well, we got a gun. Well, we got a gun, and you got a gun, so we're going to have a war. And we had a war over what? Over words, over ideas. And in the end, we won the war and our country got formed. But it all started because somebody had an idea that it ought to be different and it could be different. And they shared that idea, and enough people got behind that idea and believed it, and things changed. I mean, that's just the way it works in our world. In fact, you can just listen to the news from now on, and any time you hear conflict going on anywhere in the world, here's all that's going on. There's a group of people that live somewhere, and they have a belief about how the world ought to be. There's another group of people over here that they have a belief about how it ought to be, and these two people are fighting over ideas, over words, over belief. And it's not a faith thing. It's not a religion thing. It's a belief. It is a faith thing, but not a religious kind of thing that we mark it off to. We've developed and shared beliefs, and those shared beliefs, when people come together, they become this powerful thing. And here's what we know is true, and all of you know it. When we believe something is possible, we work on it until we see it accomplished. When I believe something can be done, I begin to think about it and plot about it and try to figure out how it can be, not only in my mind, but how I can make it happen. In fact, some of you who know, you read a lot of business books like I do, you know that there's several examples of high-tech companies who've hired these really smart kids right out of college from like MIT or Stanford, and they bring them into these tech companies, and as a part of the initiation, they play a little joke on them where they'll give them an impossible problem to solve, and the kid runs off to work on this impossible problem, and all the people that have been there for a while, they sort of laugh in their offices. Until one day, the new kid comes back in and goes, well, here's your solution. And the people go, hey, there's not a solution. It was impossible. That's why we gave it to you. It was all a joke. It's just a part of the initiation. And the kid goes, well, see, I didn't know it was impossible, so I solved it. And some of the best tech advances we've had have come about because somebody gave someone a problem that they thought was impossible, but the other person didn't know it was impossible, and so they worked on it until they found a solution. I mean, study after study after study just showed this power of belief, of faith in things. In fact, if you're a company and you're trying to hire the best salesman, again, study after study would show you that you don't need to hire the best educated salesman or the smartest salesman. If you have equal candidates, or even one that's slightly behind, if you have a smart candidate who's not that optimistic, hire the optimistic one. Because the optimistic person will outsell the smarter person every time. It's the nature of belief. Belief is the most powerful gift that human beings have. Again, not religious belief, not religious faith. We're not talking about that. So I know you're in church, but you got to remove that. I'm just talking about belief in general. Second observation. We are constantly looking for evidence to support what we already believe to be true. And we do this all the time. We're constantly looking for evidence to support what I already believe to be true. We're constantly, not consciously, but we are constantly gathering information around us to support what I already believe to be true. And I have noticed that this is particularly true of Republicans and Democrats. Some of you got nervous. You thought I was getting political there. And libertarians. It's just true for all of us. We look at an idea, we have an idea about the way the world works, and then we're constantly looking for information that supports what we already believe. It's why when you're watching something on TV and somebody backs up what you already believe, it's why you turn to your spouse and you go, see, that's why we believe that. And then when another program comes on and it gives contrary evidence to what you believe, you go, you can't trust that guy. That's why we don't watch this channel. Change the channel. We are constantly looking for and filtering out things that don't back up what we believe, because we're constantly looking for evidence to support the idea we have. We're constantly filtering out things that contrary to what we believe. This is one of the things that makes belief, and all of us have it, is what makes this faith, belief, such a powerful, powerful gift, and also dangerous. It's what makes it extraordinary and what makes it misleading. Because as soon as you embrace an idea, as soon as you embrace a belief, whether it's about business or economics or about school or about parenting or about marriage, as soon as you embrace it and you choose to believe it, then you begin to filter out anything that would be contrary to it, and you begin to support it with the things you have around us. And again, every person does it. It's the way this gift of belief works for us. In fact, I could stand up and talk to you about the nature of marriage, and study after study has shown that one of the things that makes for good marriages over marriages that are in trouble is that partners that think the best about their spouse, they have better marriages. By that I mean, partners who believe the best in their spouse, they tend to see the best. So when some kind of thing happens that they might believe contrary, they believe the best and their marriage goes better. So their spouse is late and they say to themselves, or to even other people, they say, well, there's a good reason. She wouldn't be late if there wasn't a good reason. I wonder what's up. She'll let us know. But on the other hand, other people that are already looking at a problem, they go, well, she's always late. That's the way. What do you expect? It's always going to be that kind of way. See, in fact, I could just sow enough seeds of discord among you, that some of you who just already have good marriages, if I wanted to, because I've got this mic on and I could speak dramatically and I could get loud, and then at the appropriate time I could get soft and we could play a song and I could talk about things and I could say things about marriage. And you might leave here and you might think, well, I don't know if I believe any of that, but then you'd look at your spouse and go, but you do some of those things that he said. And then that seed would be sown. And you'd begin to look for evidence to support the stuff that you've seen. It's the way this gift of belief works, that we are constantly looking for evidence to support what we already believe. Third observation is that belief is easy to maintain in a community of shared belief. Here's why. In a community of shared belief, not only are you looking for evidence to support what you believe and filtering out things that are the contrary, but in a community of shared belief, when you come in and you begin to doubt something, you say, well, I'm not sure that's true anymore. 10 other people around you go, oh, no, it's true, and here's why, and here's why, and here's why, and you support each other. The power of this thing is just incredible, is that now I have a community around me that's also pouring in to the things that I believe. And they say, that's why we're right, and here's why. That's why when you go to other countries and you think to yourself, now, why do they do what they do? I mean, I've told people all the time that if you want to understand the way other countries think about America, all you got to do is get a passport and just stay over there long enough. When you're over there long enough, then you begin to see things the way they see them, and the way that they look at us, you begin to understand it, because they have an idea, you begin to understand it, you hear it, and they support it. It's why when other countries look at us, they go, now, why do Americans do that? And of course, we all go, well, because we're right. That's why we act the way that we do. It's the way everybody ought to act. But the truth is, it's not even that way all over America. I've lived in a couple other parts around our country where they just do things weird and you can't understand it. There are parts of our country where they put sugar in the cornbread and not in the tea. Why? They think it's right. But see, when you're in that part of the country or that part of the world and everybody thinks the same way and everybody does the same thing, because the community tends to support what we already believe. That's why there's so many different denominations of Christianity, frankly. Because once you get in a community where you believe something, then the community rally around you and they support what you already believe. Now, that's sort of an overview of this idea of the concept of belief or faith in human beings. Just in general, not religious, just faith and belief in general. And I'll say again, I think that God gave us the ability to believe. I think belief is an ability that's been given to human beings, sort of like God gave us opposable thumbs. And I think if human beings thought about it and we had a choice whether to choose between opposable thumbs or our ability to believe, I think we'd choose the ability to believe, to have faith over opposable thumbs. Because the truth is, if I have the ability to believe, I'll figure out what to do without a thumb. And you've seen people do that without legs and arms and all kinds of things that they've overcome because we have this incredible ability to believe. I think God gave us this ability, and I think it's been important in the history of the world. Now, you might come up and say to me, hey, there's an evolutionary explanation for how that came about, and I'd listen to what you'd say, and because I don't know all about that stuff, I'd go, oh, that's how God did it. I'm just simple that way. Imagine what life would be like if we did not have the ability to believe. And of course, you can't imagine what life would be like because imagination is a part of the gift of belief or faith. It's what we use to imagine. And I believe God gave this uniquely to human beings. It makes our life better, and it makes us richer, and it makes us have progress. It makes the world a better place. And remember, we haven't even talked yet about religious belief or faith yet. This is just about the power given to human beings to believe and have faith. Now, let's talk for just a minute or so about religious belief. Let's think about how faith and belief applies in the area of religion. Now that we understand, how does religion intersect with belief and faith in general? Well, religious faith is just belief or faith applied to religious things. Now, some of you would disagree. In fact, there's some of you that know the Bible as well as I do, or better than I do, and you're wondering why I don't quote a verse like faith is the evidence of things hoped for. And I know those verses. Well, I'm just talking about the idea of faith in general. How does that intersect? And see, you take those kind of ideas and we want to make it all religious, and we want to think that religious faith has a power to it. It's powerful, but it's not a power. The reason it's powerful is the same reason that faith and belief is powerful in the first place. It has the ability to split marriages and cause wars and find cures. We already talked about all of that. But religious faith, religious belief, is simply belief applied to things of religion. I mean, it hinges on that phrase. I believe that. I believe that God answers prayer. Well, me too. I believe that God called Abraham out of a country and asked him to go to a place that he would show him. I believe that too, and lots of Jews and Muslims believe that as well. Muslims believe that the angel Gabriel spoke to the prophet Muhammad and gave him the book of Quran, which he wrote down, which is, they believe, the inspired word of God. In fact, here's the truth, and we don't need to hide from that just because we're Christians. If you believe something's deep enough and strong enough, when you believe it deep enough and strong enough, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you can get enough people to agree with you and believe with you something, and they start filtering out the things that conflict with what you believe, then any religious system becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It doesn't matter whether it's Islam or Mormonism or Christianity. Every religion has a bunch of believe that statements. And if you get a bunch of those believe that statements together and you put a label on it, it becomes a religion. And you'll see answers to prayer because that's what you're looking for. And when a prayer doesn't get answered, you'll do what religious people do. You'll say, well, it's because you didn't have enough faith, or you had sin in your life, to which I always want to say to people, well, if that's the reason I don't get prayer, I mean, when do I not have sin in my life? That could always be the answer for why it doesn't come about. See, I filter out the things that contradict what I believe, and I include everything that supports it. So that's religious faith in a nutshell. So now what do you do with that? Well, one option that some of you are choosing to do with that is that you just say, well, That's all religion is. Religion's just a big old ball of mind tricks, and if you get people to say the same thing, and you get a gal who can speak well enough, and they can write pretty enough, and you get enough people to believe it, then you got yourself a religion. And some of you, frankly, you believe something like that because, you believe that basically people are so afraid of death and they're so afraid of unanswered questions that they all got together and they listen to smart people and they come up with answers, and then everybody supports that belief, and bam, you got a religion on your hands. Others of you, you believe, well, that's why it doesn't really matter. I mean, that's why all religions are good, and you just need to pick one because you've read all the studies where religious people are generally happier and their marriages generally last longer, and people who are religious by nature, they live longer actually than people who aren't religious in nature. So just for the benefit, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. Just pick one and believe it. Just believe it. I mean, just pick one and believe it until it's true for you. So what's the bottom line on this? Well, cue the music.
Don't stop.
Believe it. Gotta hold on to that feeling. I don't really know. I don't know what street light people are, so I guess that doesn't get included. But anyway, that's it. So you're saying, that's it? I mean, you're in a church and that's it? So the next question is, well then, what are we doing here? I mean, what's going on? I mean, Ed, do you really believe that stuff that you just said? I do. I really do believe that. And there's no other side of the coin of those statements that I'm going to flip over and go, oh, here's the got you. I believe that faith is a gift from God. I believe that the ability to believe is the most powerful gift that human beings have. Mountains move in our world because of the ability to have faith. Well, then if all of what you said is true, why are you a Christian? And why are we working so hard to convince everybody else that they ought to follow Jesus as well? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me end by telling you why it is that I'm a Jesus follower and why we at 3 campuses, why we're doing everything we can to help everybody we know become followers of Jesus. Here's the foundation of the Christian faith. And if you're trying to restart your faith, this is so important. And my guess is you've not heard it put like this before. Even for many of you who are already Christ followers, you might not have ever thought about it like this before. Here it is. When Jesus died on the cross on that Friday, the people who were closest to him believed that he was dead. Don't miss that. When Jesus died on the cross on Friday, the people who were the closest to him, who had followed him for 3 years, they believed that he was dead. When Jesus died, there were no more followers of Jesus. When he died, the whole thing was over. I mean, before that, they might have believed something about him, that he was the Messiah, but at the moment that he died, they all believed that he was dead. I mean, after they had seen him do all the miracles, and after they had heard him teach such amazing things, and after they had walked around with him and enjoyed being in his presence, and after they were convinced that there was nobody else like him, they heard the things they heard and saw what they heard. Once he died on that cross, they believed that he was dead, and that ended it. I mean, if you'd have asked some of the followers of Jesus after he had been crucified on Friday, well, what do you think about Jesus now? Well, they would have said, in fact, we have a record of one of them saying, well, we had hoped that he was the Messiah, the promised one. We had hoped. Well, once he died, well, I don't think he's a Messiah anymore. I don't think he's the Son of God anymore. I mean, you know what they believed? They believed that he was a powerful speaker who said powerful things, and those powerful things, that's what got him killed. But he certainly wasn't the Messiah anymore, because one thing for sure, Messiahs don't die. The guy who's the Son of God, you can't kill the Son of God. We believed that he was, but when Jesus died, I mean, you cannot miss this. It's at the foundation of Christianity. The people closest to Jesus at the moment he died, they believed that he was dead. They believed that he was dead. Now this is really important, because this isn't like what happens with any other religion. I mean, when followers of Gandhi, when Gandhi dies, people around go, his teachings were so instrumental. We have to keep the teachings alive. Let's get them all together, and let's make sure everybody has a chance to hear the teachings of Gandhi. But when Jesus died, Jesus had so closely tied his teachings to who he was. He had said so much about him being the Son of God, about him being the way, the truth, that he was the chosen one. He was God himself. If you've seen me, you've seen God. When he died, his teachings were so closely tied to him, they assumed that he was false. Nobody cared about his teaching because he had tied it so much to who he was. So when he died, there were no followers. I mean, if you'd asked him again, what do you believe now that he's dead? I believe he's dead. I guess we were wrong. I mean, even his mother believed that he was dead. That's why she's going to the tomb on Sunday morning. So don't miss the fact. When Jesus died, every one of his followers knew that he was dead. They did not believe what many of us that are joining in believe, that he was the Son of God. They did not believe that anymore. Now here is why I'm a follower of Jesus. Because a few weeks later, those same cowards that ran away when Jesus' life had been threatened, and when they took it, when they were hiding together, those same cowards, they walk right into the city where Jesus has been killed, and they began to preach in his name that everybody ought to follow. And you know what they didn't preach? In fact, we don't have one recorded incident of them preaching anything where they walked in and they go, well, Jesus taught one day about a story about a good Samaritan that taught us that we ought to love each other. Jesus taught that blessed are the peacemaker. We don't have any messages recorded like that. In fact, you would hate if Jason and I preached true biblical preaching the way they preached, because for 30, 40, 50 years they had one message. Here's their message. They preached it every time they got an opportunity. It's as simple as this. There were 4 points. Jesus was the Son of God. You killed him. God raised him. We have seen him. Now all of you should turn your life over to God and follow him. That's it. Jesus was the Son of God. You killed him. God raised him from the dead. We are witnesses to that fact. Now everybody should turn and follow him. They didn't talk about his teaching. They didn't care about his teaching. They talked about what God had done in Jesus. That he was killed. That God raised him. That they had seen him alive. And that now everybody should follow him. Do you know why the church survived persecution? And I mean, it's a historical fact that Christians were persecuted. The first 30 years of the church's existence, it was persecuted like none other. Do you know why they were able to stand up to that? Do you know why we're here on the other side of the planet speaking a whole different language and a whole different culture, and we're worshiping Jesus? Do you know why I'm a Christian? Do you know why you should seriously consider following Jesus instead of all of this other stuff? Because when Jesus died, no one believed in him. There were 0 followers when he died. And then they saw something. They didn't believe in something. They believed they saw what they saw. They did not believe that something. They saw something. They saw a risen Savior. And for the next 30, 40, 50, 100 years after that event, that's what they taught. The message was the same. God has not simply sent us a prophet to tell us a way to do life. God did something special, they would say, for the whole world. It applies to everybody. He raised a man from the dead, and now everybody ought to follow him. And we don't believe that because the Bible says so. I mean, they didn't even They didn't even write these things down for 30 years later. It wasn't collected into a Bible for 250 years. They didn't believe this stuff because they read some book somewhere. There was no book to read. And by the time the book came along, hundreds of thousands of people were followers of Jesus because something happened. Jesus was resurrected from the dead. That's why they believed what they believed. They became followers because of what they had seen. Because those who were closest to him, they believed that he was dead when he died. And then when they saw him alive again, they said, "You kill us if you want to kill us, but we cannot say no to what we have seen and heard." They didn't die for what they believed. People have always died for what they believed. They were willing to die for what they had seen, a resurrected Christ. I'm not a follower of Jesus in the 21st century because of something I read in a book. I'm a follower of Jesus because Matthew, who was an eyewitness, said he saw a resurrected Jesus. And John, who was an eyewitness, said he saw a resurrected Jesus. James, the brother of Jesus, said he was resurrected and was the Son of God. I said this, I don't know how many times before. What would you have to do to convince your brother that you were the Son of God? You'd have to come back to life from the grave, wouldn't you? James believed that Jesus and testified that he had seen Jesus, who he had seen crucified. He saw him alive again. That's why I'm a follower of Jesus, because of the testimony of the eyewitnesses. And that's why we say again and again around here, and it's why we started the series this way. You won't restart your faith getting all your questions answered. You have to start with this one question. It's the center point. Who is Jesus? That's the question that has to get answers. And here's what I want you to take away from today. A single event changed how the people who were closest to Jesus answered that question. Before the resurrection, they would have answered that question one way. A great teacher who taught a lot of great things, but they killed him. I guess what he said was too much, and that's why he's dead. After the resurrection, he's the Son of God. God raised him from the dead. He's the Lord of the universe, and everybody should follow him. I'm not a Christian because the Bible says so, and therefore I believe that. But you believe that. You just believe whatever works for you, and this works for me. I'm a Christian because I believe something happened that proved that Jesus was God's Son. You have to get an answer to this question. Who is Jesus? And what should I do because of who he is? I'll tell you what people for generations have been saying that you should do. You should follow him. With your whole life, you should follow him. Will you bow together with me? And we'll pray. And right now, if you want to begin the process of following Jesus, you can just say that to him. Jesus, I believe that you're God's Son. That the testimony is clear that you resurrected from the dead, and I want to follow you. And it doesn't matter so much what you ask me to do. I want to follow you. If you say those kind of things where you say, Jesus, because of what you did on the cross, because of your resurrection, you're my Lord, I want to follow you. The Bible says you become a child of God. And the first thing that he asks you to do is that you're baptized. The first thing that people who follow Jesus in the Bible do is they're baptized. And so we want to have an opportunity to do that. If you're watching online, you contact us, email us, and we'll help you set that up. If you're one of our campuses, come to the front and talk to somebody as soon as we're done today. Father in heaven, we thank you for Jesus. Thank you for the power of his resurrection, that we don't have to believe that something you said in a book, but that we believe what the witnesses believed, that he's the Son of God because he resurrected from the dead, that he's the Lord, Messiah, he's the creator of the universe, and that we should give our lives to follow him. I pray for people who are listening, that their hearts would be open and that we would join together and follow you together. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.